This looks like more transactional leadership because she did this on page 22. Yeah? So I don't want description just saying this is what she did. Absolutely, the more theory, providing there's an evidence. The stronger answers will use more than one theory. You could pick a character, one of the actors in the case study, and just apply one theory. And I've seen assignments that do that and they pass. But there's not much depth of analysis there. So if you can bring in a number of theories, it will give your assignment greater depth.
I can say she has this transactional style of leadership and also the federal part of it. So I can mix 2-3 theories.
Yes, you can, but you need to provide the rationale. Where's the evidence for that? And that just prompted me. Thank you for asking that question, Mohammed, because again, if you were to say that this is an example of perhaps transactional leadership. But you know, transactional leadership is a combination of 4 big categories, and it's unlikely that one piece of behaviour is going to exhibit all those categories. So again, remember I said this is your demonstrating your understanding of the theory as it applies to the case study. So if you dig down into transactional leadership a bit more, that would be even better. Yeah, because transactional is a big bunch of theory together. So which part of it transactional? You'd say overall you can see if she recruited somebody and they agreed that's like, so it looks like a transaction, but what part of it is most appropriate in this particular situation? Same as if you're talking about transformational leadership. Which part of it? We talked about the 4 I's that make up. Which one of those predominate? Is there examples of one more than the other that he or she is exhibiting? Yeah? Or if you're talking about Fiedler, and we talked about the 3 factors, maybe there's examples of one more than the other, because there's no one theory will fit any one person exactly, because this is now reality, as opposed to a model or a theory. Now, one thing I should say, I've said with reference to theory, but you can also talk about models, which is like there's the transactional theory and transformational theory, but put together, it's called the full range leadership model. So if you wish, you can talk about models, but you must refer to them as models and refer to them correctly. That you don't refer to theory when it's models and you don't refer to models when it's theory. But if you want to bring in models, that's appropriate also. Is that okay?
So if you use one theory, does that mean in the beginning, as you said, there is a brief overview that we have to give, like, not full pages, but whatever. But should we talk about more than one theory that we're going to apply? Or should we talk about the main one that we're going to be using?
That's your choice and your decision to make.
Okay.
What I said was that the students tend to do better where you apply more than one theory, because it is rare that one theory can be applied in totality to one person. They might show aspects of one theory, but there might be, in different situations, aspects of another one. So it'll give your assignment more depth.
Yeah.
That okay? So that's part 1 of section A. Section A, part 2, the second part. If you had been appointed in Tracy Byrne's place, Tracy Byrne is one of the key actors in this case study. She's the CEO, I think that's her title. Would you have handled things in the same way? So this is where I am now looking for your opinion. I think that I would have done this, but I also want it supported by theory or evidence. Why do you say this? If you're going to do something differently from the main actor, why are you doing it? And what do you hope to achieve that would be different? So again, you need to refer back to the theory to do this. Okay? Yeah?
But in this part we can use I.
Yes, it will be appropriate to you, because I'm asking you now, what do you think? Put yourself in the shoes of Tracy Byrne. What would you do differently?
Would we speak like the author said, the third part?
In the question 1, it's the third person, always the third person. The second part, if you had been appointed in Tracy Byrne, you're saying, this is what I would do differently. So now you can switch to the first person.
Okay.
In part 2, yes. But when you're referring back to the literature, you'll go back into the third person again. Is that okay? So I am asking for your views and your opinion in the second part, but again, you must support it, the rationale for why do you think that? Yeah? I would do this differently. Well, what I want to see is why. And what do you think the different outcome? Because clearly you want to get a better outcome. So what does the theory tell you that you could expect?
So, you mean in that term, I have to critically criticize her personality in that situation?
Oh, not her personality.
Leadership style.
Exactly, her leadership
The
style.
style that she used and why it was wrong?
No, again, you watch your language, Mohammed. It's not wrong, and you will see actually she was very effective. So what I'm asking you to do is put yourself in her shoes and see what she did and how she behaved and how she engaged with teams and stakeholders, and say, from now your knowledge of theory, is there anything that you would have done differently to what she would have done? Most of the time, everything she did was fantastic. So she's actually a very effective CEO. But I'm asking you to comment and to reflect on her leadership style and how it was applied in different situations. In those situations, would you do anything differently and why? So the critical thing is why. Okay? And I did have one student, I think 2 years ago, who answered that question. If you'd been appointed in Tracy Byrne's place, would you have handled things in the same way? And the answer was simply yes. I don't recommend that as an answer. I don't recommend that as an answer. If you want some marks.
But it could be yes in some points.
Absolutely, and that would be absolutely valid, yes. And that's actually a very good point. This lady said you could agree with her, and you will actually, I would say, agree with her in many situations. So there would be appropriate to say that you feel that she acted appropriately in this situation, demonstrating this leadership style because. But in this other situation where she did this or said that it could be more effective if she were. Is that okay? Keep referring back to the case study so I know what you're talking about. Okay? Keep saying on page 3 of the case study, paragraph 2. Let me tell you, I will be smiling and a lot happier as I'm correcting your assignments. It's really horrible to have to go leafing through the case study to see what you're talking about when I don't know what page number. You know, you're saying this is an example of it. Oh, where is that? Okay, so make life easy for me.
Just one question.
Yes.
Would you recommend for us to speak or explore Tracy any question one, since we will speak about her approach to the question?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can choose Tracy Byrne if you wish for part 1 as well as part 2. She is the subject in part 2, so you don't have any choice in that. What I would recommend is you read the case study first, to think about, can you give both parts sufficient attention if you use the same person twice?
Yeah, because it's got to be continuous, right?
Yeah.
Not a different question.
No, they are 2 different questions.
Yeah.
Part 1 and 2 are 2 different questions.
But then would you use the same theory if you chose the same person? Would use the same
Exactly.
theory and the same everything in both?
So that's what I'm saying. It's up to you to choose. You read and see, can you do justice if you use the same person twice? Now, quick question. I'll come to you in 1 second. Let's talk about how you're going to structure this assignment. Okay? So we've talked about how you're going to go about doing it. By the way, in terms of referencing, what I would suggest, but it's not an absolute must, is you put your references for section A, which is the case study leadership part, at the end of section A. And then you put your references for the strategy part at the end of section B. That just saves myself or Professor Boyle searching through a long list of references when I can read your part and then flick to the end and there's your references. Is that okay? And actually Professor O'Boyle and I will be sharing the marking. So I will be marking the strategy and the leadership part of some of them. So we will just be dividing them up between us. So I'll be marking both sections and so will Professor O'Boyle, because we both teach both. Is that okay? Now, so that was your references. Structure. So let's talk about section A, part 1, with reference to the literature on leadership. How are you going to structure that? What are you going to start with? Excellent. Ha ha ha. How come nobody else said that? You're always going to start with an introduction. Okay, so section A, part 1, starts with an introduction. You can call it introduction if you wish. When do you write your introduction?
Last.
Exactly. So do not start with the introduction. Always write, a good introduction will be written last. What should be in the introduction? Yeah.
A summary about the article, what's going on, what we are talking about.
No. I'm glad you say that because that's a big no.
It's about the article itself.
No.
Highlight
Okay,
the main points that
hold
you
on,
need.
let me just address that because again that is something that people do. When I asked what should go in the introduction, and the response here was a summary of the article. It's actually a case study, so get the terminology is actually very important because an article is different from a case study. But I do not want to see a summary of the case study in the introduction, okay? If you can do it in 2 or 3 lines, maybe okay, but I don't recommend that unless you can do it very, very succinctly. It's not necessary unless you can do it in 2 lines. This case study is about, and if you can write it in 1 or 2 lines, good, but again, just in terms of how students lose marks, I've seen students take 2 pages summarising the case study, and there's 2 pages of words gone, about 600 words vanished in a summary of the case study when you haven't been asked to do that. So I read that all and say, yeah, that's a very nice case study, but I can't give you any marks for it because I didn't ask you to do that. Okay? So again, you must just answer the question, because no matter how good it is what you write, if it doesn't contribute to your answer, you won't get marks for it. So that's why, whilst it might be a nice idea, you won't get marks for it, which means you're throwing marks away. So we're back to the introduction. What's going to go into a good, first of all, how long should an introduction for this section be? How long would it be?
100 words.
250.
1,000?
No.
No.
Short. And I'm going to say 2 paragraphs, ideally. Okay? And each paragraph should only be a couple of sentences. So a short introduction. What's going to go into your introduction?
Highlights of what you're going to be talking about.
Highlights, maybe. Generally, an introduction doesn't have highlights. What's the purpose of an introduction?
You introduce
No.
You introduce the actor you are going to talk about.
Good.
And why you chose to talk about him.
Excellent. Okay.
Providing direction to the
Exactly. So you're telling the reader what's coming. Yeah? How you're going to structure this assignment. Yeah? So if I'm marking this assignment, what's one of the main things I want to know when I'm reading the introduction? No? Who am I talking about? Yeah, because that's the key thing in your assignment.
So,
Critically explore the leadership approach as one of the key actors. So in the introduction, I want to know pretty quickly
which one is the
which
one?
actor you're basing this on. So that needs to go into the introduction. What else needs to go into the introduction?
Their role in the organization and why you chose to talk about them. Or
There- no, I didn't
Or
have-
maybe if you have if you think that the 2 or 3 theories can fit into that character's role, you just tell them that I will analyze him.
Maybe. Again, just be very careful. Don't waste words telling me what I haven't asked. So I don't need a rationale for why you chose this character. So you don't need to explain it.